KISW.
BJ, I'm very excited. Our next guest is awesome, and I love his stand-up.
When my wife told me we were having a kid, I was like, that's awesome, baby. You're going to make a great single mom.
Please welcome to the show, Brian Posehn.
Oh, man.
That just came out of left field. I was listening to the Fartist, and I love the new record. I think it's hilarious from beginning to end, and it's cool to know that it was recorded here at the Neptune Theater. And that line comes out of nowhere, and it's just like, oh my, because you're going on a great topic about how you never wanted to be the guy talking about having a kid.
Right.
Brian,
and that's a little meaner than I usually get.
Yeah,
too,
it was just like I had to stop for a second. Remember when I first got the record? I'm like, what? Where did that come from?
Right.
And the Fartist, by the way, which was recorded here in Seattle, available on Amazon.com. Go check that out. Brian, I've been following your career for a long time, so I'm so stoked that we finally got to get together, have you on the show. But, you know, as a geek myself, I don't know if you've run into this. Are people surprised you have a wife and a child and kind of like a normal life? Because people are surprised. They say, wow, BJ, I never thought you'd be able to do that.
Yeah, I still get that, too. But it's a little insulting when people say that.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah. You know, impregnated? It's like, yes. I have the same parts as you. I'm not a monster.
It is something about...
And I charmed her. I'm a comedian.
Yeah.
You know?
But, you know, you're a big geek.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why I always loved you early on. It's like, all right, finally, there's somebody who's making something of himself who reads comic books. Because for so long, for so many years, I was told, you are going to be a loser. You know, there's nothing good that can come of this world of yours.
Right.
So I've always looked to you as a champion.
It's all kind of turned around, though. It seems like that's not the case. But, you know, I love seeing these girls with the I Heart Nerds T-shirts. It's like, well, where were you when I was crying through high school?
Well, I was even talking to my wife about that. And we were at a park, and there were all these chicks that were, like, skateboarding. And I'm like, and I tell my wife, and she's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, you don't understand. When I was a kid, it wasn't, like... cool to be the skater metalhead, but now all of a sudden it's both genders are fans of it.
There were never hot girls at Slayer shows, and now there are. But when I was a kid, they all looked like Richard Ramirez wearing a wig, you know. And now there's like attractive girls in the metal, and like that whole Suicide Girl thing of Portland and up here never existed when I was single. Because I would have loved those girls.
And that's another juxtaposition that's interesting, Brian, is the fact that, you know what, you're famous for loving metal and really being involved in that scene. And then here you are, you know, writing for comics and loving comics. You know, when we were growing up, those two would never mix. Like, we would be getting our asses kicked by metal fans.
Right. But I think in their bedroom it existed. Like, I think a lot of those guys, and because I know a lot of the metal bands now, they grew up, you know, some of the biggest nerds I know are guitar players.
Yeah.
Well, and also,
because you have to, you know, spend all those years just sitting in your room, and they all know, you know, the same stuff. They, you know, grew up on comic books, and they just didn't admit it when they were, you know, trying to meet girls.
But if you paid attention, like the lyrics of Anthrax's earlier stuff, I mean, they were written songs based on the comic books that they were reading.
Yeah, Judge Dredd, and then it was full of Stephen King references. So they were reading books too. Like,
what the hell's that about?
Like 300 and 800 page books. Like, they read The Stand. That book is huge.
That is so true, and you're right, Brian. We grew up in a time where we just couldn't believe that you would go to a con and see so many hot chicks wearing next to nothing who actually were nerds.
Yeah. Well, there's still the girls that are paid to be there, but yeah, you go now, like I'm going to San Diego next week, and it's full of like girls that, you know, again, it's like, where were you? You didn't exist.
How do you feel about it? Because right now there's a lot of hoopla, and I know you're a big fan of metal music, and a lot of people are getting all weird about the fact that the guys in Metallica are going to be at Comic-Con, which I think is awesome. I mean, but I know some people are just all up in arms. That's not cool.
I'm just bummed that they're doing a secret show the same time I'm on stage. Like,
wow.
I just found out.
How do you know about a secret show? What's going on here?
I know. Anyway.
That sucks.
I'm in that world, yeah, so I'm pretty bummed. Like, I'm going to go watch them at the con and then go over and do my show, but when they're doing, like, you know, 150 size room,
Well, I watched
tiny place.
That video footage of them at their own that music festival that they did, and they played on the second stage as a fake band.
Right.
I watched it on YouTube. I'm like, I couldn't imagine being one of the few hundred people that are just waiting to watch a band they never heard of because it never existed.
And they played the first album, right? It was all really early stuff. Yeah. They just played Kill 'Em All. Yeah.
We were talking earlier about the most bizarre stuff you see at a show because of that dude that was nakedly crowd surfing at the Kings of Leon show, and we thought when Brian comes in, we have to ask him because you know what, you've seen a few, you've done it, you've been at a few shows.
Yeah, there's a couple that come to mind right away. When we were driving in, I heard the topic. I was at a punk show, the Vandals, and I saw a guy crowd surfing in a wheelchair. And that was insane to see. And I was up on stage with the band watching, and you could see the guy get passed up, and then he's going, and he's sitting back, and he's loving it. So it's clear that he's done this before. And the best part of it was, the security guys were so nonplussed by it. There was no oh my God, there's a dude in a wheelchair. They just went, all right. They grabbed the guy, just put him and sent him down on his way like they do anybody else crowd surfing.
There's a guy around town that has, whenever we've done this topic before, I was waiting for someone to call with that guy because he'll go to Godsmack shows, or I remember one of my first concerts was at Mudhoney in the Seattle Center. It was outdoors, and all of a sudden it was that guy, maybe the same guy, in a wheelchair being crowd passing him around. I'm like, what? It's nuts.
The best thing, though, by far was Clash of the Titans. It was Megadeth, Anthrax, Slayer, and then Alice in Chains. And 91, I think, Sacramento. I had regular seats, up in the thing. And we went down to the pit, but we were sitting behind these two dudes, and these guys were like Beavis and Butthead right before Beavis and Butthead. And they were totally characters. We didn't know these guys, but they were clowns. And these just two metalheads. They bought brand new T-shirts, and they were so into Anthrax and Megadeth that they ripped each other's shirt off. But it was this dude bonding thing where first they're headbanging, and then they're fist pumping, and then they start ripping at each other. And I was like, what is happening? And these two brand new T-shirts destroyed. And then during Slayer, one of the guys gets pleasured by some girl that was just sitting there.
Wow.
I know.
What?
It's insane. Just meets this girl, romances her during Slayer.
Sure. Perfect
and then
music, yeah.
She pleasures him, and he high-fives his dumb buddy while he's getting pleasured. And me and my friend behind him we're just sitting there we're watching this free show. The best metal show ever is on the stage, but we're getting these two idiots have the night of their life.
You kind of want to know what they're up to now.
Yeah,
I feel like they're
probably
still friends.
talk about that show. That was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Which, by the way,
They get drunk, rip each other's shirts off still, and talk about it.
Right.
I think you get to talk about that for a good 20 years before someone gives you grief about you should move on. Because that's pretty impressive.
Right.
Because I was saying earlier, man, I go to shows and see all stuff like that or cool stuff happen, and then it would just make me more depressed about who I was as a human being. Because I look at that like the sword in the stone, how did that happen? What special ability does he have that I need to acquire?
Right. Well, the girl wasn't that special. I mean,
it was a Slayer show back in the day.
She wasn't a. Yeah.
Well, Brian, you're
remember the Richard Ramirez reference?
Yeah.
The BJ Shea Morning Experience on 99.9 KISW.